Welcome to Vicaver Art House, to the third roundtable within the project Break in case of emergency and exploratory roadmap for independent musicians and labels within emergent digital environment. Project is co-founded by Music Ira program. And we are actually on the half of this road. We enter in the second week of our capacity building program with the topic of copyrights. So tonight we have a guest from Portugal, Diogo Morais, in front of Creative Commons. Then a guest from Netherlands, Eric Schrijver, author of a book that it's called Copy This Book, so an artist's guide to copyright. And Pedro Marques, on behalf of Professional Association of Independent Musicians in Portugal. And this roundtable will be moderated by Nuno Rodrigues from Arda Academy. So Nuno, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lena. What a great collection of people we have here today. Thank you all for joining me in this roundtable. I feel like a lot of the things, a lot of the work that we're supposed to do here tonight has already been done in advance during this afternoon, this morning and afternoon. I think it was very, very productive. So one of the things that we discussed today interests me a lot because it's an aspect, we could debate the ethics aspect of copyright and open source and alternative forms of copyright like Copyleft. But one aspect in particular that interests me is the business model idea behind or working with this concept. So Eric, you have edited a book that's been published with a Creative Commons license, and I was making this joke this morning that you probably have a hard time talking to labels, publishers, and explaining, oh, I want to put out this book that's called Copy This Book, and it's licensed with it's not an open source per se, but it's licensed with a Creative Commons license. I think that's a very interesting aspect of the work you did. What I wanted to know, and I want your opinion on this, is do you think that open source is at odds with business models that promote revenue for artists and other people involved or other entities involved, such as publishers, etc.?
I think that's an important question. I think it's always relevant to look at, like, it changes a lot from person to person. So how important is copyright even in your daily practice? It changes immensely between, for example, a visual artist who will work mainly selling originals, so the copies that circulate of their work, it only adds to their value in a way. Mm-hmm. And somebody like a musician who mainly works releasing records, copyright is much more important to them. And then also I guess that changes a bit how you look at these questions. But then to publishers, I don't know. I think it would also really be, I think it's a matter of experience, and once you can point to a few books that have been done this way, it will be maybe easier for publishers. Or you could do like I did and work with a small, like, independent publisher who really wrote me actually an email saying, like, hey, wouldn't you like to do a book in Creative Commons? So
you were the one courted and not the other way around.
So it wasn't, it wasn't me forcing that down them or having to convince them in any way. Mm-hmm. And I think, but they're onomatopoeia, so props to onomatopoeia. I think they are forward thinking about all these things, because also, for example, I don't have a traditional copyright, like a deal where you cede the copyright to your publisher, which is the traditional publishing deal. So the idea is like, okay, you give them these economic rights because they are much better at exploiting them than you. They know they can reach out to the press, the distributors. They have they can make this work for you, whereas you can write. But actually, the reality with a lot of smaller art publishers and also labels, I think it would work much the same way. Although I think the music industry is a bit more diversity maybe in this level. They tend to copy the legal approach of the big places, but they don't realize that the relationship between the artist and the label is very different, in the sense that they're also generally asking the artist to put in a lot of work themselves and to be for everything that's publicity to the work. Like for example, the copy editing and these kind of things. In the case we're talking about a book. So then I also don't think it's justified of the publisher to ask to have all the copyright, because you're doing in part the publisher's work. But a lot of small publishers don't really recognize this, and they will ask you to sign over all your rights. But some of them, like Onomatopoeia I worked with, actually are really convinced about, okay, we are doing something in helping this work go out there, but in the end it's your work, so you're supposed to make these kind of decisions. And so that means that I only have a deal with them every time the book gets printed. I do a little contract, and they say, hey, we're going to print the book again. This is the money we'll do, and everything stays with me. But I think that's really their merit, not mine. Like, they're a really cool place to work with.
All right. So Pedro, you're working with AMAEI, which is the Association for Independent Musicians and
Artists and labels, yeah.
Artists and labels, yes, from Portugal. And one thing that I know that you work on is promoting knowledge on a lot of areas of the music industry per se. I don't like using the word industry, but let's make it easy and just go in that direction. And one of the areas that you obviously talk about a lot is copyright. And with your experience working with independent artists, do you think that this is something that they're getting more knowledgeable at, or do you think that's something that they're put off by, and they might be being exploited in ways that they don't understand, or missing opportunities because they don't understand it?
Yeah. I'm working with AMAEI for like 2 years, something like that, and I think that here in Portugal, mainly, the independent artists or musicians or even labels, there's still a gap on knowledge about these kind of subjects, not only about rights and everything, but like you're saying, about the industry mainly, and how does it works. And for what I know, there's a lot of missed opportunities they are losing, and a lot of money they are losing probably too, because they don't know how they should do and to work with their career and their projects. So I think there's a huge gap of knowledge that should be how do you say it?
Filled in.
Yeah, that's right.
But do you think when you're saying there's a huge gap, you're referencing, for instance, other countries which have maybe a more knowledgeable attitude towards this, or?
Yeah, if you talk about like countries like Germany or Sweden or even United Kingdom, there's more knowledge about it, but there's a lot of other countries like even like Poland and everything. I was there a few months ago, and I noticed that they have kind of some problems. Greece and everything, they have almost, probably different one, but probably in Europe, it's not level at the same. Not every countries are level at the same place, you know. So there's still a lot of work to do in Europe you can get a balance um, with you can balance the industry and you can work as a union in music industry.
Something we discussed today was because I was thinking if maybe actions like these are helping fill in that gap in a way or close that gap in a way, or something we discussed today and there were particular points towards or particular ideas about it, was how responsible as an artist are you for your own self-education in a way. I'm not saying that's my position, but there was mention of that. Do you think that there's a lack of proactivity on part of the artistic community regarding this field of knowledge that's very deeply connected to what they're working?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. How many artists are here? And we are.
Well,
yeah,
you can raise your hands.
You have the same problem with all the workshops and everything that we do in AMAEI, trying to help self-release artists and even the labels. We are supporting them with knowledge and everything, and I still think that there's a lot of them that just their concern is about composing and creating, and they don't think that it's important for them to know about all this industry. They are trying to make something. But I think if you want to really be an artist and live from it, you should understand how the industry works. And if you need help, you should try to get some help. Like if you want to be an artist, you should have like probably a good manager, a good agent, a publisher, and to help you to create your project and as an artist, and everybody has his own place on that project. I think it's like that. As an artist, it's very difficult for you to do everything on your own. So, and you shouldn't be obliged to know everything. You know.
So we're discussing this sort of gap that you're mentioning, but curiously we have someone from the Netherlands here today who felt compelled to publish a book, calling it an artist's guide or dubbing it an artist's guide to copyright. So this seems to me that this lack of knowledge or this area that might seem like black magic to some people from afar, this idea is not specific to our artistic network here in Portugal. Eric, do you feel that you've encountered the same sort of doubts and the same sort of lack of knowledge in your travels or the people you've visited and you've met presenting your book?
I think there are two separate things, and there's one thing where I really recognize what you're saying is that we still live, of course, with the idea that art embodies some kind of purity and that we don't want to make it, dirty it with just mundane things as accounting and taxes, and and almost the idea if I'm really good at art, I'm probably not so good at those things. And these are all, I think, kind of romantic ideas, and maybe something is changing about that. Maybe if it's like you say, if I can write a book like that, it's in the era of the time in a way. So yeah, it can be really frustrating. And then I guess I've been like trying to make things that people don't realize are sexy appear as sexy as they are. I don't know. But
lawyers all across the world are now standing up. Yes, I am sexy. Thank you, Eric, for
yes, I saw
shining
it.
a
I
light
saw
onto
it.
our sexiness.
Definitely. And but yeah, it is a bit frustrating that. But what I hear now also from people is that it's maybe a question of language. Like I also wrote this little text about like labor, the social position of like independence versus salaried versus artist status in Belgium, which I think you can find lots of things about online. But then people like the art teachers, they told me, yeah, but you write it in the way that they talk, so then it's, you know, so
that way you can communicate it.
So maybe it's a question of language, but I still think it's really strange that we have this conception that these worlds, two worlds will never meet. So I don't know what I can do about that, but there's another part also where I think there is to really progress on these levels, you need to also have some kind of solidarity and work together and build resources together, but also like these artists, like rights management organizations, in a way they are about that, artists getting together, but then artists are not concerned enough with these structures to actually try and be in the boards and participate.
Yeah.
And so the industry can have a much bigger grasp on them than they would potentially have. I don't know. And this lack of solidarity, there's a really nice, book called Down and Out in Paris and London by George Orwell. And so he is living as a kind of like bum in Paris, and he has a really like shitty job in a restaurant. And he says, yeah, it's interesting in the restaurants because the cooks, they're all communists, and the waiters, they all want to be bourgeois, but they're not because they're working class, but they both make a shitty wage. But he says the difference is that the waiters, they spend all the time in between the rich people.
Yes.
So they think they
are part of that structure.
They want to, this is what they aspire to. But to get there, they will have to somehow, you know, they're feeling competition therefore with the other waiters because this money is scarce. And so they are generally not communist. So that's the parable he makes. And I always thought it's not a parable, an observation. But to me, it applies very much to art, in the sense that I feel it's very hard, for example, for artists to get to like. There's every country will have a art. How do you call a syndicat? A labor movement.
Okay.
That you can join for artists, but almost nobody joins it because. Artists, they just feel that they have to go for themselves, and they might see other artists maybe as competition. Part of this is the independent spirit you need to make things, but part of it is also our like capitalist liberal economy really profits from that.
So you've mentioned something interesting about language. And I'm gonna ask Diogo. Diogo has been also. This is not an interview, so please feel free to pitch in. I think we can take questions as well and interventions or commentary from the audience. But Diogo has been working as a lawyer for, I want to say a long time, but I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying you're old, okay? So I'm saying you're experienced, like Jimi Hendrix. So
12 years, I guess.
12 years, you know. 12 years is a fairly good amount of experience. So for 12 years you've been working as a lawyer, and one of the areas that you've delved into is intellectual property and copyright. And you've mentioned something today regarding your work where you try to translate this very obtuse legal language into more affordable, let's say, ways of understanding these concepts within legal design. So just to clear out legal design, when we're talking about legal design, we're talking about designing contracts, for instance. So do you agree with Eric, and is this something that you have witnessed, that when you change the language, when you create accessibility, people can apprehend these concepts more easily? Do you have any examples of this in your work?
Yes. For instance, what I like most in my work is that when I present a contract or I need to make a contract or any agreement for a person that works in art, the first thing this tells me is that I don't have anything more than 2 pages. So usually you don't limit an artist's work, but they start to limit yours because they don't want to read more than 2 pages. That's one of the first things. But I was remembering my part of my history concerning the other interventions. I started studying copyright because of a friend of mine. She's a painter, and she went for Erasmus in UK. When she came back, she brought the copyright regulation over her faculty, and she told me, this is the future. This is not taught in Portugal. If you want, you can start learning about those stuff. And because of my social matrix are most of artists, I started to study copyright to trying to help them in their work. But at the beginning, for me, copyright was a very strange thing because most of the academic books about copyright are about protection, monopoly, not sharing, how to make money about that thing. And my friends have the way of sharing and cooperating and trying to pick up others' works and make a collage and all this kind of illegal stuff that if you are very strict to law. And then I found Creative Commons, and with Creative Commons I found not only the openness of the law, but also the easy way to communicate. That's one of the things that I like in Creative Commons, is that they try to communicate with icons, also the visual part of this kind of multimedia, but also they are worry, all the people that are volunteering in the Creative Commons, worry how to translate law to normal people, as we call them, so not lawyers. And I think it's important because not only artists want to be autonomous, and when they are independent artists or in the beginning of their careers, most of them don't have a lot of money to go to lawyers, and usually copyright lawyers are too expensive. They want to know how to protect and how to sign a document, but in an easy way. And what I try to do first is like to start in this kind of draft of an agreement that could work for different situations. And what I was telling this morning is like to work in an agreement that could be like a form. So you have this kind of sections in the agreement, but the first pages you just tick what you want for that specific purpose. So with this, my clients could be autonomous in doing their work and not always need me. I lose money, of course. I lost, but also, but I could help people. The other thing that I want for them to understand and work in copyright is for them also to lose the urban myth, because in urban myth, I don't know what urban is. Yes, that's the way of saying it.
I think so. I think you're
urban myth. Okay. What I was trying to say with this is that in Portugal we have the authors' rights regime, so people understand law and copyright in the movies and online. So they have these misconceptions sometimes about copyright. One of the most misconceptions is that you need to register your work, because they learn this in the US. Now it's not common there, but there is this common practice. And the first time, my first clients is that I want to register my work, where can I go? And I need to understand them and explain what to do. And I lost myself now, I was saying.
But you can keep going. It's very interesting what you're saying. So I think
yes, I remember.
There you go.
Sorry. And not only for them to become autonomous, but also to understand the red lines.
Okay.
So my idea with the sessions and the work that I do in my office or in the workshops is for the people to understand that till here they can work alone, And if they read some parts, okay, it's better to call a lawyer. And now we have WhatsApp, just send me a picture and I can say sign it or not. But we can manage this kind of difference because I understand what Pedro was saying. Sometimes they just want to work. They don't want to learn about copyright because they want to do their life. And
prefer to have someone to help them.
To help
and say,
them.
okay, if you want this for if you want this for your career, so you should take this contract, or you have to change this or that, so you can get what you want.
Yeah, then again, I think don't think I completely agree in the sense that, like, for example, you want your accountant to do your taxes, but you still want to understand the basics of the taxes. Like, I don't know, it's because you cannot. I think also a lot of in the past, when maybe there was more money flowing to upcoming artists from the bigger labels, things like this. In the past, so many people have been burned also by people that they put too much confidence in, but that only happens if you're like, no, that's their that's really their department. And so yeah.
I agree with you because I was saying also that sometimes I have this sense that many people are too lazy because today
That's true.
because today with Google you can find
Let's
a lot
not
of
promote.
information.
Let's not promote Portuguese stereotypes here. We're talking
No,
to an
but I was
international
not
audience.
speaking about laziness in not working or not. No, laziness in the in finding information.
Yeah, that's true.
Because today, okay, you have a lot of information, but you have a lot of web pages that explain copyright for. Sometimes you can go pick up and make some cherry picking and discover and to be informed at least on the basics.
Yes, but at the same time, it's important what you're saying about creating accessibility also creates this autonomy and understanding of concepts. I believe essentially what you've done, what you do in your work and what you've done with your book is to provide these tools for understanding, better understanding these issues. So in your practice, people approach you to help you solve problems, obviously, but do you feel that people also approach you to try to understand the problems? These are different things. You were talking about laziness, but do you have the opposite experience as well? Do you think that there's growing interest?
Yes, not only about copyright, but also about labor law. Mostly about labor law, and people want to understand because they have these misconceptions because in their common sense things should be in a different way, and when they face this kind of juridical or legal problems, they want to understand, not to commit the same mistake again. They want to understand how it works an NDA, or how they can put a confidentiality notice on the email concerning the proprietary of their ideas, the property of their ideas. They now that they are working online, they want to know some difference between copyright law and author's rights, because most of them, they are selling their work in web platforms that the terms and conditions, the law that is applicable is from UK, and they live, for instance, in Portugal or Spain, and they want to understand what specific words that they need to be about. And I think they want to learn to be more autonomous also, and to know how to identify those red lines, and to enter in business in a more fashionable way.
So this interest from people who are not legally trained, I believe you mentioned, Eric, in your book, there's a passage that says that maybe one of the interesting things about this is that usually books about copyright are written by legal scholars who have an interest in art, right? And you, on the other hand, are an artist who suddenly got interested into law, which I think it's funny. You've mentioned already. You kind of saw
But
the
it's so sexy. You must.
the sexiness, yes. So besides the evident and not sufficiently praised sexiness of law and lawyers
And law scholars.
What has drawn you? Was there a specific issue that you had to go through that eventually pushed you into getting interested in this?
Yeah, I think there are a couple, but I think really the first one that struck to mind, like, I guess I knew about like open source and things, and I thought it was really interesting. But one that was really triggering for me was when I think I already talked about that. I think I explained this to you, Fatma. That at one point I decided to art direct the internet, and I spent an evening and a year surfing the internet, and.
You decided, to art direct the internet.
It was a very bad idea, ended very badly, and I will talk
That's
about
a colossal
the details.
task.
I will talk about the details when the stream is off. But and so one thing I stumbled on, because I was just so actually what I was at the time very was like sort of amazing was the amount of amazing visual material that's in the public domain and that people could do something with, and all I was seeing online was it was like, I think it was the WordPress era when everything had the same template and things. I was like, but there's so much visual amazing history that's so at our very internety grasp. It's just like one click away, like so. But then I saw these things about museums saying like, this is the public domain, but still you cannot use this for commercial purposes. You have to ask us for a license. And I was like, hey, that can't be right. And then I found...
How is it in the pub? How do these ideas...
Yeah, that doesn't seem right at all. And so I found some kind of paper from Leiden University where researchers, they explained that there was a problem for heritage institutions, but because also the government incentivizes them to make money themselves, so that it's partly funding, partly own entrepreneurial activities. And so one of the ways that they try and do this is say like, okay, but let's try and market our images. But the images that are not in the public domain, they cannot market them because the original author still has copyright. So they start doing these things, and then I read in this article that museums, they put false copyright messages, like they say, copyright this museum, and it doesn't really mean something because the museum never had copyright in the first place.
Over the work.
So, and then that really got me very mad, I think, but also really interested because it's also a very political question in the end. Like, what is because we have these public institutions, but we also want to function them as economic units. And then that couples to another political question, but that's more, I guess, a cultural question than a political question. But it comes like our idea about what an author is, because there is not only a kind of economic thing, but there's also a kind of idea that this kind of protection is good, because we are protecting something good and noble and and pure as the arts, and so that I feel that that's why there is, by default, a lot of support for strong copyright legislation, because everything thinks art is amazing. And so I know that triggered a lot of different like synapses in my brain. And now, that was 2009, and now 14 years later, I put one of these images on the front cover of the French edition of the book. So it's already very small. As I started very cheeky, I put it very small in the colophon of the English edition. But now it's on the front cover of the French, because it's actually been apparently with me all along. So this triggered me in the beginning, and then I moved to Brussels to work with a graphic design collective called Open Source Publishing, who are amazing. If you ever need something in Brussels designed with only free and open source software under free and open license, go visit Open Source Publishing. Actually, Porto also has designers working like this. We met designers from Porto, Manufactura Independente, with Ana Carvalho and Ricardo Lafuente. Shout out! So there is people that are working this way, and of course they got very interested in both the political and the sort of creative. There's also a creative challenge, of course, to work this way. And that sort of formed my vision of these things. And then after I got a bit like tired of working with the collective, who always did lots of different jobs and worked with lots of different people, and I wanted to do more like a longer term project by myself, but with a lot of people, with me being like the director, I guess. I
like an orchestrator of
more I see it as a
Right.
cinema director more, because I really like it if you have a cinema director. You can go to a movie because you like the director, but you can also go because you like the actors, and if you're a bit more geeky, maybe because of the camera, the cinematographer, or the
argument.
script writer. They
Yeah.
can be so. So I like that, because you still think a movie will testament of its director's vision, but you're not going to assume that they did everything.
Yeah.
So I feel with the book, I feel that way. But yeah, I wanted to direct it, not because we had a 8 people completely horizontal thing before, and that's great. But at some point, it's
You wanted to do your own thing.
yeah, and I also thought it would be nice if we would talk to a bigger public, because the things we were doing with the collective, they were all the other people who were into open source. They thought it was really cool, but it was not necessarily connecting to people. It was connecting to people, but it was harder to connect to people who were not already into these things.
Because you were essentially sharing.
Yeah, we're in a
stuff
group
they
with
were
shared.
already interested in.
We're sharing with it, but also you need that, because you need groups of people that share the same thoughts to really push things and work on things. But I wanted to do something for a bigger audience, and so I had the idea, if I make something that seems really practical, but then without knowing it, people will also have this sort of more critical
and
like
create
aspect.
discourse.
And talks about the underlying philosophies of copyright, which are really interesting, but also messed up in ways. Then I can sort of lure people into this without them even knowing that they were interested in the first place. And that was my evil plan. And then it was really funny. Then we did the French translation, and there the plan did not work, because they said, but Eric, if it's not critical, French people are not even going to read it. So you don't have to hide that. You should like put that out up front. So in the French edition, actually the subtitle changed from
An artist
guide to copyright. It's called A Guide to Copyright and the Public Domain by and for Artists.
Okay.
So it's a bit long.
It's a subtle.
It's a bit long, but the difference, like, it puts the
critical
comments,
aspect of it.
It puts the comments in the public domain. They don't say public domain. They don't say public domain. They say the comments, the cultural comments. So immediately it makes it clear that there is some kind of other projects
Besides understanding copyright.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
So it's interesting that you've mentioned this. We've been discussing copyright and copyright doubts and understanding copyright, but this is also about, well, essentially Copyleft as well. So you have been, during your investigation, we could say you were drawn to this. To these ideas, you were interested before, but you've mentioned understanding some underlying philosophies being messed up in your words. So you were drawn to these other kinds of answers towards copyright. Do you think that the current landscape of Copyleft, let's say, is providing enough resources or answers or tools for artists to manage their intellectual property in a way that more suits more closely their ethics?
Well, that's a
complicated question.
Because I have an answer to this, and the answer is no. But it's not the fault of free and open source and free culture. I think for me, the most important things that these movements do is make us rethink intellectual property. Mm-hmm. But the practice of it as a practicing artist is very much one of somebody trying to save the climate by putting the heating lower.
Yes.
It's like, it's great, but it's something that depends completely on the individual goodwill of people choosing to contribute, and it doesn't change the fact that the rest of the world is maybe not doing it. So
a suitable analogy would be, so for instance, these ideas of Anthropocene, they try to make us personally responsible for climate change when there's very much bigger structural problems.
And there are actually people with who think that our current copyright system is actually quite sufficient, that might even go and say, you see, there's even an alternative to it within the confines of the copyright system. So I am quite I think I've gotten much more cynical about copyright than I was before I wrote the book. I managed to hide that fact more or less in it.
I think you've succeeded.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, while I think it's completely amazing and commendable to learn all you can about free culture and to try as you can in the moment where it works for you to apply these licenses, it doesn't change the fact that we're fucked in the sense that all these laws are such an amazing layer cake of treaties that some things, such as the long duration of copyright, they cannot be undone. Like it's written in too many legal layers that are too much international. So it's a kind of like the antibiotics that can no longer be effective or something. No, it's wrong. No, viruses can no longer be killed.
Like will not be by the antibiotics.
By the antibiotics.
So we're past the point of no return.
So that means that I don't believe that that you can change that by proposing alternatives within the system. I believe there is an important role for civil disobedience and piracy. Like, for example, Sci-Hub, like piracy when it's ethically correct. And I think in the case of Sci-Hub is a really great example. Like, I cannot imagine, I don't know if the people watching at home, I wanted to say, but like people in the audience and watching at home. Or, I don't know, in a bar, maybe a sports bar.
Their car.
Somewhere. But, sorry, I lost my...
You were going to explain Sci-Hub.
Sci-Hub, yeah. So Sci-Hub is it's a scientist, a female scientist from. I say female, which is really stupid. I just want to say her name, but I forgot her name. I still don't know her name. Shit. Isn't like because like she's one of my heroes. But so she's working in Kazakhstan, where her university did not have access to all the publications. And so she started to send around emails to colleagues who were in other universities. And so she ended up hacking this system where a lot of researchers were connected to each other and they would sort of share passwords. It was like a really sophisticated password sharing system. And then she made a front end to it where you could request an article. It would look in all the articles that already downloaded. And if it didn't find it, it would connect to one of her scientist friends from all over the world and download through their scientist friend the article. I mean, this is complete piracy. This is completely against any copyright law. But it was completely the right thing to do. And this, I think, pushed a lot also more for open access, but still, you might still end up in jail or extradited to the US or I don't know. I mean, she's in Russia now, so I think that's the best place probably for her right now. But it's she made things advance, but probably at a cost to herself. So I believe that the current system needs to go down some other way than through internal reforms. And I don't know how that's going to work. Sorry, I feel like I started like a sort of.
No, this is. I'm feeling a bit sad that we're not able just to go down this path because I have my job here is to moderate. So
I saw that it was called the middle way, but like I was saying before that it sounds like a Tony Blair kind of.
I was going to. Don't anticipate one of my last questions.
Sorry, shit.
It's the second time.
Sorry, but that just means we're too much already on the same wavelength.
But I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask Pedro, who works with independent artists and labels, in a very practical way. So because sometimes we're discussing this abstract ideas, of course, but in a very practical way, in your daily work with these artists and with these labels, have you ever felt like they have been barred from some aspect of creativity, of their creative process because of copyright, or because inability to access or work or alter or modify a certain work?
In that creative way, I don't think that happens. But probably what could happen is if they are trying to make a career or live from music, and they can be disappointed because probably they should not get where they want, because there's still a lot of things missing, and in AMAEI we try to help them. Always, it's our job to do that, helping to understand copyright and neighbors' rights, and try to help them making registrations in SPA, GDI, AudioGest and everything, and try to explain everything. So, okay, now you are in this point, you should do this, because you need to be everything okay, or else you are going to leave a lot of money, probably, or some money, or your money on the table of those entities. So you should have this all done and correct. But in a creative way, no, I don't think that they are sad or disappointed with it. I think that probably they could be disappointed if they don't get enough money from what they are doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and
I have a...
go ahead, Diogo. I was just
story.
about to get to you.
No, because I just remember that it was a story from a friend of mine. He's a poet, and in the city in the north of Portugal, there is a bar that usually they have this kind of nights that you can read poetry. But not in the specific night. He went there and he starts to declaim his poetry, but he didn't have the papers, because in Portugal, if you want to make a show for public audience, you need to have like a permission by a general inspection, and you need to have the authorization of the copyright holders. But he was the rights, he was the poet, he was reading his own poems, but he got a fine for reading his own poetry, because he didn't have all the documents. Of course, he didn't pay, and they could argue that after. But somehow we tend to enter in this kind of problems, that
yes.
Even if you want to read your own poetry, you need to sign a document yourself saying you authorize yourself to read your own poetry.
I somehow imagined this sort of Kafkian sort of process where he would sue himself for having read.
But I don't think that sounds too bad. I don't think this sounds too bad, because it's also poetic, like he, like that. I don't know, that it's his as much as his public's, or like, that it doesn't, that he, I think I find that pretty poetic, but that might just be me. So on the other end, on the creation end, I think I hear a lot, like, and you can even see it, like sampling was big, and I'll get more into that tomorrow, but like sampling was really big when it first was possible, and then subsequent lawsuits made it less and less easy to do, and samples have disappeared from independent music. Like they're still, well, no, they're disappeared from released independent music. You'll still hear lots of things if you go out to the club, but and so it changes what people do, and so the law has an enormous influence, an enormous impact on
people's lives and
creativity.
their creativity.
And,
yes,
and there is a lot of actual, like, I don't know, I love theater companies, they want to do a play, they cannot do the play. Things like this is super common. So I think everyone, I don't want to say everyone, but I think a lot of working artists will feel this at some point or another.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to wrap up with a question that might take a while for us to answer, but I wanted to get your perspective on this. So this roundtable that we've been so gently invited by Vicnik, and thank you Hugo and Lena and all the team for inviting us here today and for being such great hosts. So this roundtable, roundtable's names is something in the way of copyright and copyleft. Is there a way to a middle ground, which I find it's an interesting sort of attitude, because how would you define this middle ground, and is that what we're actually looking for? And is that something which is strive for? And I'm hoping that you're going to have very different opinions on this. So considering this idea of middle ground, or the starting point being this idea of future, I wanted to know your opinion on how do you envision innovations in copyright in the future? How do you think the way forward? Well, it's a two-pronged, actually, it's a two-pronged question. So in a way, how do you think things will go? What will happen in this field? But also, how would you like it to go? What do you expect is going to happen? But also in a different way, what would you wish would change in the future? Any one of you can start.
I will start with the boring parts for more legal perspective. I think for some part of artistic expressions, like visual, for instance, that they are, I can say the example of Disney, they are trying to extend the copyright protections by trademark law. So Disney, the Mickey Mouse will enter in the public domain. The first Mickey Mouse will enter the public domain, I think, in 2025. And Disney already starts to make those specific character, and they made this with Winnie the Pooh when they enter in the public domain, and register the characters as a trademark, because with trademark law you don't have any duration. So it's a way of extending the copyright protection besides the law. But at the same time, I remember one regulation of the European Union concerning not registered designs and the protections of designs that are not registered. And it was a regulation that was aimed to protect the independent designers that don't have the money or the capacity to go for all the formalities. And what I'm trying to say is that even though if we have different layers of treaties and different legislation, somehow, if you want, you can find and try to open a little bit this kind of legal matrix. And you can try to, and what I would like is to have a not so long period of copyright protection, because I loved when Fernando Pessoa entered in the public domain, and I saw different ways of editing his texts, and I would like to be living, but I want, if when José Saramago's works will enter in the public domain, and to see how people treat that same work, not only in the standard form of the publisher that owns the rights, but in their own creative way, and will give us too many beautiful things.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to make a comment on, you just gave me this most sublime, sad feeling now.
Because you'll probably be dead. You won't be around.
Thinking about Saramago, which is a writer who's been dead for a while now, and it's so iconic, and his works exactly will be protected.
We'll
probably.
Be protected more 65
yeah,
or 60
I will
years.
be.
Yes, we will.
At the rate I'm drinking, at least, I'll be gone.
I'll be dead.
So Eric, can we hear something from you?
Well, I think I already just explained a bit that I am not very optimistic. But then again, it's easy to not be optimistic about because it's also so tightly interconnected with the way our world economy works, and the world economy, the way it's structured and works, isn't especially making me feel great either. But I think maybe also artists need to realize that this is that artists' rights is one of the most purely liberal markets that you can have, where it's really pure offer versus pure demand. Which is, if you want to use a very famous sample, then you have to be very rich. And that's why I am still interested in rights management organizations and this idea, even if today's version might not be ideal, but I really like the idea that everyone who can pay a sort of predetermined fee can reuse something. If we're not in a kind of if copyright is going to last that long, because it's not going to get any shorter, there's no way that it will get shorter unless capitalism falls.
Wishful thinking.
A man, a woman, or whatever can dream.
A person can dream.
Person can dream. So one thing I would find amazing if there would be something of this sort of, if the completely ordered or like offer demand dynamic of it could change a bit, that like, look, okay, I want to use this, nobody is going to be able to tell me if I can use it. I guess I'm quite opposite in thinking of many artists who always think about how can I prohibit people from using it. The example is always if my political opponent uses it or whatever. Why would they? I don't know. But for me, it's also the other way wrong, that people cannot use it if they want to use it. So maybe that if we're still living in some kind of economy with exchange of money and things like this, then at least that everybody has the possibility to use something if they for a predetermined amount, and that and not the way it is today, that if you want what's the cultural reference, what's an important cultural reference for you, then you're just going to have to find the person who has it, and the more famous it is, the more expensive it is, and I think that's really not like I would want it to be.
Thank you.
Well, that's a little bit tricky, because if I think like an artist and a musician, that I'm trying to live from my work, I would like that I can make some deals with my work and try to make some licenses for whatever, for cinema, for commercial or something, and get some revenues for that. That will be good. That will, and probably about the long of the time I can, because I have children and I hope to have some grandchildren, I would like to leave something for them too. So the 70 years, it's probably not that much if you think on, if you have family and you want to leave something for them. So, well, I would like that everything could be more easier and more clean in legal rights and everything, and so to everybody to understand it better, it more simple, clean, and easier to, so it can be accessible for everybody, like someone that is an independent artist that is starting now and easily can understand, okay, I make a song or something or a work, and this is my rights, I have to do this and this, and if someone like it, you can contact me directly, or someone that is representing me, and I could be easily be able to make a deal for something, for an image or something, and I can earn some money. Like a painter can make an exposition and sell his paintings, or a sculpture or something like that. That would be really good.
But I love the idea of making money. So I can really see your point. But I think the reasoning you make is one a lot of artists make, of course, if everybody is going to get the same deal, then some people will be worse off because some people might have gotten better deals. But like the reality of people, independent artists working as independent economic actors, where they have to be able, where they're going to negotiate for themselves, is actually that they're not going to get a better deal because, you know, that's why labor gets organized and artistic labor never gets organized. They're like, if everybody as individuals is going to try to get the best deals, the result will be that some individuals will get a very good deal, most people will get very bad deals, and the average deal will be worse. So that's where I don't believe that complete individual control might seem enticing, because if you will get rich, you will get the richest, but it's not necessarily from a community standpoint the ideal. Even if the goal is to get the maximum amount of money for your artistic community, individual bargaining might not be the way to go about it. So that's more a kind of like economical, like labor kind of perspective. And then there's the other part, which also is of the length of copyright, which is also very common for artists. That's why copyright has gone all the way it has. Why it's so big is because most people think it's a good idea. If you don't think a long time about it, it seems like a good idea. And it's the same thing with the long protection. If you think 10 seconds about it, it seems like a good idea. So most artists who never really thought about it think it's a good idea, because it's like, yeah, great. If I get super famous, then my family can live from me for the next decades. But the reality is, I'm very sorry, but like, this is only the reality for 1 in 100,000 artists. It's really something that does not apply at all to artists, or at least not to the vast majority of them. And then you can say that do we want such strict laws so that in a country like Portugal, like 100 artists' families can live off the copyrights? Because I don't know, it cannot be much more, 100, 200. Then I think the damage this is doing to culture is completely offsetting the sort of social benefit of this few families living because they had this chance of being gifted something they did not even do themselves. But well, that's true with houses too. But okay, so let's take that last part out. But
if you are talking about that, it's the same with football players. Nobody, you don't have 2 Ronaldos or whatever. You have 1 Ronaldo, and you have a lot of medium good players.
But that's horrible. That's such a winner takes all. That's such a winner takes all perspective. I don't know. I don't agree with that at all.
I think that should be balanced, and everything should be balanced for. So accessible for most of the people that really want, not for only for minority. No, that's not the idea.
Because like the football players that are playing in the lower leagues, they're not suffering from the fact that Ronaldo is getting a lot of attention. If you play for a professional,
society in general,
society might maybe suffer to some extent from it, but not from the same extent that it's suffering from being denied access to its culture. Yeah. So like all the kids can still play soccer in the street together and be as inventive and creative with their feet as they want, and with the ball. It's like Ronaldo is not stopping them from this, whereas our current copyright laws actually deter people from achieving certain cultural goals. So I don't think I agree with the analogy.
Well, we've had a lively conversation. I especially enjoyed this last part. I hoped it provoked the roundtable attitude that I was expecting. We also do weddings, baptisms, if you're interested.
Bar mitzvahs.
Bar mitzvahs, we're multicultural. Thank you very much, Pedro, Eric, and Diogo for joining me tonight. Thank you for inviting us. Also, please feel free to pose any questions or any commentary. Otherwise, we are going to say goodbye, and to those at home or at the sports bar, enjoy your night. The rest of us, I'll meet you at the bar. have a shy crowd tonight. Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you for inviting us. I've enjoyed the conversation.